All right, so this is a suggestion via Discord. The name of the video is Why U.S. Consumers Feel So Broke. Let's go and check this out immediately. Guys, there are a couple of things. Money is not the same money it was. At $1, it does not equal $1 from 5 years ago. Reality, right? Corporations themselves got super comfortable, and I mean excessively comfortable, charging in overinflated prices because of, everything was a little bit more money to get at that time, right? They refused to go back down to the prices before. They're like, why would I make less money, right? All these corporations made billions of dollars, right? While there was allegedly shortages everywhere. They like money. That's why you feel broke. That's why.
This chart shows consumers' confidence in the economy during the Biden and Trump administrations. As of June 2024, confidence in the economy under President Biden averaged nearly 28 points lower compared to during former President Trump's term.
Okay.
It hit an all-time low back in June of 2022. According to the latest survey from Gallup, 53% of Americans believe the Republican Party will do a better job with the economy, compared to just 39% who favor the Democrats.
I can see that. Just going to be honest. Like right now, oh yeah, get these people out the White House immediately.
At this point, every
Pack 'em
survey
up.
that I know of tells me that Republicans are seen as having the advantage for the management of the economy.
Voters seem to think that President Trump was a better steward of the economy than President Biden, and I think that's going to be an important advantage for Republicans.
While the U.S. technically isn't in a recession, roughly 3 out of 5 Americans believe it is. In 2024, nearly 3/4 of Americans said strengthening the economy should be a top policy priority, while a third mentioned economic issues as the nation's most important problem.
I think that the economy is really top of mind for people. They are really concerned with how their families are doing financially and economically. We are in a very strange situation where people don't feel like they're thriving in spite of many strong indicators in the economy.
So did Americans enjoy a better economy under President Trump or Biden? And which candidate will be able to fix the economy?
I think a lot of economists and commentators, and certainly a lot of politicians, believe that there is a disparity between how consumers are feeling about the economy and what the high-level economic statistics about economic growth, about the level of employment, about the rate of unemployment are telling you.
Statistics of that sort cut very little ice with average households and with voters. They judge principally on the basis of their own experience. From the standpoint of consumers and average households, the issue is, how am I living? Is my ability to afford the basics of daily life improving or not?
President Biden's term has seen the highest inflation in 40 years, reaching a 4-decade peak of 9.1% in June 2022.
Oh,
As of June
God.
2024, prices rose by 19.3% during his
Yep.
term.
Solid
compared to just
20%, guys.
5% for former President Trump during the same time frame in office.
Consumer sentiment during President Biden's time in office has been quite weak, and I think the explanation for that is pretty straightforward. People really don't like inflation.
High inflation also ate into Americans' purchasing power. According to estimates, the average inflation-adjusted weekly paycheck shrunk by about 4.4%, or $50 during Biden's term. That's despite the fact that wages have risen faster under Biden than under Trump.
Average
Yeah, they would have to, all right? Like if the federal government has decided that we're just going to start printing money all willy-nilly, like it's nothing, right? Then of course the strength of your singular dollar is now going to be less. That's like economics 101, bro.
households have judged that their wages, salaries, and annual incomes have not been rising robustly during this
Right, they
period,
haven't been.
even as there's been an extended period of what economists regard as full employment.
Price inflation has been growing faster.
Oh, he said full employment. See, the problem is here with the concept of whatever this employment rate is, lie, shenanigans, basically, is people are underemployed. That's the reality, okay? This is a gig economy nowadays. So all these crazy, miraculous, spectacular job numbers you're seeing are basically made up of gig workers, right? That's it. Like the food service workers, generally.
than wage inflation. So the purchasing power of wages
Those who
has
deliver
actually
food.
gone down. You're able to buy less with every dollar you earn.
When you
Right.
have buying power that's been eroded, what in the past might have seemed like a necessity is all of a sudden at risk. And so a $4 cup of coffee at Starbucks or a $5 plus value meal at McDonald's becomes a luxury under those circumstances. And all of a sudden, even though that's not occurring in the context of a technical recession, it feels recession-like to many, a technical definition that's irrelevant for somebody who can't afford to buy what they want, much less can't afford what they need.
Or could.
Nevertheless, economists acknowledge that the Biden administration has made significant strides in growing the economy.
The challenge associated with the pandemic and then the beginning of the Biden administration was one of the most immense and difficult challenges that has faced the American economy and by extension the president and political leaders and the citizenry. One of the most challenging in a century. The performance of the U.S. economy, let's say over the last couple of years as we speak in 2024, has been much more robust and resilient than would have been expected.
A direct comparison of hard economic data shows that
Oh.
the economy under Biden was stronger than it was under Trump across several important measures.
Give me that right
Discounting
now.
the months most affected by the pandemic,
Okay.
Biden's administration added a monthly average of 269,000 jobs.
Guys, DoorDash, Uber Eats, that's at least 268,000 of those numbers.
Compared to Trump's 180,000. The S&P 500 index also saw a 42.1% rise during Biden's term, compared to 33.6% over the same period for Trump, hitting record highs in 2024. Overall, the U.S. economy grew by 8.4% since Biden took office, compared to 6.5% during the same period under Trump.
We brought this economy back from the brink, and we've designed our strategy not only to provide for a temporary boost, but to lay the foundation for a long-term boom that brings everyone along.
But the economy's rebound cannot
Listen, I hear you talking. Show us.
be solely attributed to the Biden administration.
Part of that is the fiscal response that emanated because of actions by presidents and the House and Senate in spending money to ride to the rescue. The other part of it is that the Federal Reserve gets pretty good marks for having eventually shown up and restricting interest rates and allow.
Listen, he is no doubt the boogeyman. This man's name is Jerome Powell. He is responsible for anyone who's out there trying to buy a house right now. You see, you keep getting those decline letters, right? It's his fault. Blame him. Blame that man. It's him. He refuses to lower interest rates. The reason why you cannot afford the house that you could afford easily, okay, 2, 3, 4 years ago, is because of this man right here. It is his fault. He's doing this. He refuses to drop the interest rate. He refuses. Look at our 10-year Treasury bonds. They're also absolutely abysmal. They correlate, right? But all right, Jerome Powell.
For having eventually shown up and restricting interest rates and allowing for a sustainable economic expansion.
Experts also say that the very measures
Yeah, but you still can't go buy that house, though, right? You still can't afford it. But you could afford it, but you can't afford it now because, extra $1,000 or more in your monthly mortgage payment is going straight to interest rates. Congratulations, Jerome Powell.
aim to boost the economy were also what hurt the consumers in the end.
As a result of the various stimulus packages enacted in 2020 and 2021, economists estimate that American households had accumulated $2.5 trillion more in savings than they would have had without the stimulus bills that were enacted under first Donald Trump and next Joe Biden. And so when the economy reopened, that huge pile of accumulated savings came up against an economic reopening that was spotty. And famously, the supply chains that help companies in the United States produce what American consumers wanted, those supply chains were snarled and disrupted.
Yep.
So if inflation is too much money meeting too few goods, right, the stage was set for a classic
Terror.
spike of inflation, and that's exactly what happened.
To
Right.
combat this inflation, the Federal Reserve has had to raise interest rates to relatively high levels. And that affects
Listen. Okay, so the interest rates were definitely higher at one time in history. Absolutely. But these were not during like massive inflationary events. I mean, these are back when houses were still like $50,000, okay? When the average person could work 2 years and basically pay off the house. I think now you have to work 6.6 years to be able to even afford a house. So you're still going to get declined at the bank, bro. Right? They don't care about nothing any longer, bro. It seems like they want to find people specifically to approve that they know cannot afford things, just so they can get them into that house, make those payments. You know they're going to get evicted, and then you're going to get a free house that you can basically auction off at any time. That's basically how it looks. It looks very scamish. And who's backing it? Jerome Powell.
the interest rate that you pay on your credit card
Jerome Powell.
statement. It affects the interest rate that you face if you want to take out a loan to buy a car. It certainly affects the interest rate if you want to take out a mortgage and buy a home. And so uncertainty about the level of prices, declining inflation-adjusted wages and incomes, and really high interest rates all add up to consumers not feeling great about how things have been going over the last few years.
Economists are still debating how much Biden's stimulus can be blamed for the burden of inflation. President Trump had also signed a $2.2 trillion stimulus bill into law during his time in office, sending out $814 billion worth of financial relief to those affected by the pandemic, over 3 rounds of stimulus checks.
When the American Rescue Plan was signed, the unemployment rate was falling, not rising. The economy was growing, not shrinking. Households were sitting on a whole bunch of excess savings. Putting a bunch of stimulus into a growing economy doesn't make sense. So if the American Rescue Plan had never happened, we still would have had an inflation problem. But in my view, the American Rescue Plan took what would have been a moderate but still real inflation problem and turned it into
A
pretty
gigantic
severe
one.
inflation problem. And I would even go so far as to say that the American Rescue Plan was probably the most reckless fiscal policy pursued by the U.S. government in decades.
We do not know and may never know what would have happened to the economy if the Biden administration had done nothing to further stimulate it after it took office.
The American Rescue Plan passes any cost-benefit analysis with flying colors for 2 reasons. One, I know critics want to assign inflation to the American Rescue Plan. Inflation went up in every advanced economy, and in fact, it went up more in Europe and the UK than it did here, and that's
There's a reason, guys. Listen.
because of their closer exposure to the war.
Okay, so here, let me give you my perception. So during that entire year when things were happening, right, I was absolutely stuck in Spain. I could not leave. Normally, I would spend half the year in the United States and half the year in Spain, right? That's how it was for about a little over a decade. But the problem here is that when this happened, I was stuck under martial law. Nothing was moving. All of these companies were closed. All the businesses were closed. Only one person could leave the house, and it was just to the grocery store, where they would only allow like 2 people in at a time, and as long as they were separated by literally armed men. Okay, that was the situation that I was literally in when this was going on. All of those companies shut down for an entire year. Okay, inflation was going to happen out of the gate anyway, just to make up for the year that you shut the country down. Okay, that's just it. Okay, that's my opinion. I think that the reason why things are the way they were going to be that anyway, basically.
As the supply chain snarl-ups began
shut a whole
to
country
resolve,
down.
you saw
You shut the
inflation
world
come down, and at the same time, the rescue plan reduced child poverty, preserved union pensions, helped families and businesses get to the other side of the crisis. So the twofold reason why the critiques of the rescue plan are wrong is because they misdiagnose inflation as a uniquely U.S. problem, and they ignore the benefit side of the ledger.
Former President
Okay.
Trump's campaign did not respond to CNBC's request for comment. But a consensus among economists is that neither Biden nor Trump is entirely to blame.
I think it is never fair to blame or credit a single president for what's happening in the economy.
You can't. You can never do that because you never know who or what was going on kind of at that time. Like a lot of the times, a previous president wrecked things, and what you're seeing are the repercussions of the previous president. I would think that when it comes to the second term, that's when you can actually judge a president on like what they've done. Okay, the second term, consecutive second term. That's the only way things actually make sense. If you try to blame a president for something, but not blame the other one, right? Bro, he was the president for 3 days. He didn't cause that. Basically, that's how I look at it all the time.
And those things were happening before that person even took office.
The primary causes of inflation were really two things. One was the imbalance between supply and demand as supply chains really seized up, and we had the lack of production of a lot of things. And we had immense demand for a lot of things that could not be or wasn't matched by production. Sort of adding a second leg to inflation was Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It led to massive increases
in wasteful money that we sent to this country.
Commodities prices and energy costs. To some degree, consumers themselves were to blame for the inflation, because who is it that has the say over demand for goods and services? It's all
people with the
who
money
buy those things.
Right.
And so consumers themselves help to inflame this imbalance between supply and demand. But, you know, if you're talking about putting food on the table, you don't have a lot of choice. You might have some choice in what you buy, but you don't have choice in whether you're going to buy food and energy and paying for shelter.
At the end of the day, a president often has very limited impact on how the economy performs.
Americans have a tradition of either giving credit for the performance of the economy to the president or giving blame to the president for the performance of the economy. And the irony about all that is, whether that's deserved or not, the presidents themselves try to take credit or blame shift with respect to the performance of the economy, whether it's warranted or not. I think ascribing great control of the economy to any given president is a fool's errand. And what I mean by that is...
explain that.
The U.S. economy, which is connected to the global economy, is much more complex than that. My sense is ultimately our U.S. Federal Reserve and its decisions are much more important, much more relevant and meaningful for how the economy performs than a...
So basically what you're saying is Jerome Powell, right? I know. Okay? I pack that man. Get him out of office. I'm sick of him. Guys, get him far, far away from making decisions. I beg of you. All right? Can we please get somebody else? Please. I beg you. All right? I beg you. I'm not talking about giving everybody free money, 0%, 1%, 2%. I'm not talking about that, guys. All right? I honestly think that would make things worse. But I do know for a fact we can go down 2.5 points. Okay, if we can just go down 2.5 points, that'll open up a lot of the people who are struggling right now with real estate, who are renting, right? Who are even looking to purchase a house right now. That would save the lives of people. Okay, and Jerome Powell is refusing. He's refusing. Okay, so I'm glad that it's coming down to a blame fest on Jerome Powell, because I agree. Blame that man. Okay, blame Jerome Powell.
U.S. president.
The unprecedented nature of the pandemic also makes it challenging to directly compare the economies during Biden's and Trump's terms.
The sharp break that we see in sentiment is not so much between Trump and Biden, but I would say before and after the COVID pandemic.
Right. That's it. That's 100% it.
Trump is that he lost more jobs than any president ever. Those job losses that occurred at the end of his term were a consequence of the pandemic.
Of the 19, yeah.
I think President Biden is being heavily criticized about the inflation the United States has experienced.
Yeah, because he's obviously coming in on the tail end of the 19. Yeah, obvious. I don't look at it like that, right? But I just don't like it.
American Rescue Plan made our inflation problem a lot worse.
I'm honest.
We still would have had an inflation problem even if it weren't for the American Rescue Plan.
Right.
You can't look at the last 5, 8, 10 years without sort of saying asterisk, maybe 10 asterisks, there was this pandemic. There's just no way to separate that out. And if you do, you risk being wrong or simply overlooking an immense event in recent American and human history.
Mm-hmm. And guys, what's funny about that is, not really funny. Inflation hit us absolutely terribly. Okay, fact. But the main thing also that happened was, guys, all of these other nations utilize our currency as like a backup currency for their own currency. Okay, so their dollar, or whatever it could be called, right, peso, right, is backed off of our U.S. dollar. So if our U.S. dollar is going crazy like this, okay, and there are people who are in countries that, again, back off of our U.S. dollar, where they may make $175 a month, specifically Venezuela, right? That's what they're making. Now that U.S. dollar now means nothing. Okay, so their money that they were living and feeding a family off of for $175 a month, that doesn't mean anything anymore to them. Right? So of course, what comes next? The migrant crisis. The migrant crisis is a literal repercussion of the world's issue that happened. Okay, does that make it right completely for everyone to come flood the southern border? No, right? But it is a actual, legitimate issue and cause of that. 100%, guys. If it's bad here, imagine what it's like in other countries that back off the dollar. Another reason why the BRICS nation thing started popping up, guys. All of these other nations sick and tired of being sick and tired with the U.S. dollar fluctuating the way it does. So they're trying to make their own currency. It's the reason why gold and precious minerals, the prices of them a couple of months ago, just went completely crazy. Because all of these nations, BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, right? These nations come together, start buying all of the world's gold to back their brand new currency, the BRICS currency, off of actual gold. No fiat nonsense, guys. Right? They're sick of it. And there's nothing that we can really do to fix it now, guys. But other than have corporations come back to reality. Okay, a Big Mac should not cost $18, guys. It shouldn't. Sorry. Not as long as people are not making the, right? They're not making 20, 30% more, guys. They're not.
Even so, the Republicans may have the advantage on economic issues in voters' eyes.
100%.
Every survey that I know
in the eyes
tells me that Republicans are seen as having the advantage for the management of the economy.
Right.
Time will tell whether that gap can be narrowed. But right now, the gap is real and it is significant in its size.
For the Democrats, it's up to Kamala Harris to convince voters of what she can achieve with the economy.
I think Vice President Harris was given an opportunity, in a sense, by President Biden when, I think mistakenly, he seized upon this phraseology of Bidenomics, which was to take essentially too much credit for the performance of the U.S. economy, which, unbeknownst to him, ended up being translated to blame for the inflation that most Americans associate with their current experience.
Being at the top of the ticket rather than being at the bottom of the ticket gives her the opportunity to state her own priorities, reintroduce herself to the American people.
It's not clear that Democrats can score an outright win when you turn to visions of the future as opposed to arguments about the past. But I think they have a better chance of narrowing the economic gap that now separates the two parties in the eyes of the American people if they focus on the future.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they have a lot to contend with. I mean, Kamala is not amazing on immigration. And again, the current Democrats are not specifically amazing on the economy based off of what he just said. Biden took the blame for it. Well, buck stops here. Just like the head of the Secret Service said, guys. The buck stops right at that. So if this is Bidenomics, it's trash. Okay, it's bad. Basuda. It's bad news, guys. But all right, listen. You guys all have an absolutely amazing day. Enjoy your day thoroughly. Guys, before we go, are you guys subscribed to the other channels? Logical Movie Reviews with Mr. L. Boyd along with Mr. L. Boyd Music. Both are found in the description. Check it out.